Maine, 1997. A quiet town, the kind where nothing ever happens. At least, that's what people believed. Elliot was like any other child, curious, playful, always asking questions, until one night, everything changed. It started at 3:12 a.m. His mother, half asleep, heard him talking. Not crying, not calling for her. Talking. A soft, hushed conversation with someone in the dark. At first, she thought he was dreaming, but then she heard it. A second voice. Not Elliot's. Low. Faint. Speaking back. She rushed to his room, expecting to find him with a toy, maybe talking in his sleep. But when she opened the door, he wouldn't move, he wouldn't blink, and when she asked who he was talking to, he gave her an answer she would never forget. The next morning, Elliot had changed. He wouldn't speak, not to his parents, not to his teachers, not to anyone. A child who had once been full of life now sat in silence, staring at walls, flinching at shadows. And then, the drawings began. His mother begged him to tell her what was wrong, but Elliot never spoke again. Doctors called it trauma. Experts blamed stress. But the nanny cam in his room captured something no one could explain. 2 months later, the family moved away, but before they left, they found something tucked under Elliot's bed. A torn piece of paper, a single sentence written in a child's shaky handwriting. He told me not to talk. West Virginia, 2004. A storm rolled in just after midnight. The wind howled, shaking the windows of the Carter family's home. Inside, 8-year-old Daniel Carter lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the thunder to pass. But that night, it wasn't the storm that would keep him up. It was the knocking. Daniel turned over, expecting to see rain streaking the glass. Instead, there was a face, watching him. He didn't scream, he didn't move, he just stared, and so did it. The next morning, he told his parents. They dismissed it. A dream, a shadow, just the wind playing tricks. But Daniel insisted. And then, the next night, the knocking came again. His father checked outside. Nothing. No footprints in the mud, no signs of anyone. But the next morning, they found something on the windowsill. Daniel started changing after that. He wouldn't look people in the eye. He grew pale. He stopped talking unless absolutely necessary. His teachers noticed. His parents grew concerned. And then, he made a request that sent a chill down their spines. He wanted them to open the window, just for a minute, just to let him inside. That was the night Daniel disappeared. His bed was empty, the window was open, and in the mud outside there was only one set of footprints leading away. They searched for weeks, no trace, no clues, just one thing left behind, clutched in the sheets of his bed. He has no eyes. Ohio, 2011. A family of 4 moves into an old Victorian house at the end of a quiet street. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had lived there alone for decades. The neighbors said she was quiet, but that sometimes at night they heard her talking. The strange part, she lived alone. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. The parents were busy unpacking. The children, 7-year-old Lucy and 5-year-old Ben, explored every corner of their new home. But then, the whispers started. At first, it was just Lucy who heard them. Late at night, faint voices drifting through the walls, too quiet to make out, too close to be the wind. Her parents brushed it off. Old pipes, a draft, the house settling. But then, Ben started talking in his sleep. One night, their mother checked on them and found Ben sitting up in bed. His back was to her, his head tilted slightly. Listening. She asked what he was doing. He turned slowly and said something that made her blood run cold. "She's in the walls." The next morning, Lucy refused to enter her room. She told her parents she heard someone breathing inside the walls. Software shaky, right behind her bed. That night, their father decided to prove there was nothing to be afraid of. He took a flashlight and pried open a small panel in the attic, one that led into the narrow crawl space between the walls. Dust filled the air. He squeezed inside, his light cutting through the darkness. At first, it was just insulation, pipes, wires. But then, he saw them. Scratch marks, deep grooves in the wood, clawing their way out, and among them, small, crumpled notes. He picked one up. The paper was yellowed, brittle, but the message was clear, a single frantic sentence written over and over. "She won't let me leave." The family moved out the next day. The house still stands empty. The whispers never stopped. Montana, 1993. Street. Mary's Elementary was shutting down. After nearly 70 years, declining enrollment and budget cuts had sealed its fate. By June, the classrooms sat empty. The halls were silent, all except for one student, who never left. The last official day had come and gone. Teachers packed their things, the janitor locked up. But as he did his final walkthrough, checking room by room, he noticed something strange. At the end of the hall, a single classroom light was still on. Inside, sitting at the last desk by the window, was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His back was to the door, his head slightly tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. The janitor cleared his throat. The boy didn't move. He stepped inside, calling out, "Hey, kid, you're not supposed to be here." The boy finally turned his head, just enough to speak 4 words. "They forgot about me." The janitor stepped closer, confused. The student's uniform was outdated, his shoes worn. He asked for his name. The boy didn't answer, just smiled. "I can't go home." The janitor felt something cold in the air, a wrongness settling deep in his chest. He took a step back, blinking, and in that instant, the desk was empty. He didn't say a word to anyone, but a week later, when the school's principal came in to finalize paperwork, he noticed an old student registry left behind in the office. A list of names, some were familiar, but one stood out. A boy who had been enrolled in 1953. A boy who, according to the records, never graduated, never transferred, never left. St. Mary's Elementary was demolished a year later. But before it was torn down, one last photo was taken. A final snapshot of the empty classroom. A single desk, pulled out, chair slightly turned, as if someone had been sitting there, watching. 5 cases, 5 children, 5 encounters with something unexplainable. But the question remains, what connects them? Experts have tried to rationalize it. Sleep paralysis, overactive imaginations, shared urban legends. But the details refuse to be dismissed. The voices, the whispers, the unseen presence that lingers just beyond the edge of sight, and the one terrifying pattern. They were all watched first. Each of these children reported feeling something long before the events escalated. A presence, a shadow in the corner of their eye, a voice calling their name when no one else was there, a growing sense that they were not alone. So what is it? A spirit? A forgotten entity? A force that thrives on fear? Some believe these cases are proof of something far older than ghosts, something drawn to innocence, to vulnerability, something that waits. The families moved. The houses were abandoned, demolished, erased from history. But did it stop? Or is it still watching? Do you believe these were just coincidences? Or is there something out there that preys on those too young to understand the danger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced something watching you, something you can't explain, tell your story. You might not be alone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because next time, the story might be even closer than you think.